Have you ever asked yourself the question, what would stop you watching Doctor Who? Have you got red lines? Because I'll have to say, I'll give you an analogy. Some of us are dog lovers, cat lovers. When you see they're lame, in pain, struggling, and it's terminal, the family have to discuss when's the moment we actually sadly have to decide to put that dog or cat down. Have we crossed the line in Doctor Who? What would be that line? Does it exist? That's what we'll be discussing in this really lively, big debate that all fandom's talking about. Because the other version is, if you say, no, I'll always watch Doctor Who. Always, always, always. I understand that. I've watched every Doctor Who episode so far. But if that's your argument, we may miss the moment when we should have made a stand. It is very possible that you had Davros, Timeless Children, By Generation. I could just do a whole list. Maybe we crossed that moment and it's now too much because it's been butchered or vandalized, if that is your opinion. So I've got so many people debating this. So join us, add your contribution. What's the red line? Because I have to say, some say it's the female doctor, some say it's the gay doctor, some say it's too much messaging, some say it is the Timeless Children, some say it's Renew Retcon, Davros or Sutek. But what would tip you over the abyss? What would stop you from watching? The point of no return. I mean, I know I'm shouting at the TV a lot now when I watch Doctor Who. I'm rolling my eyes. I'm exhaling in disbelief. I'm like some Whovian walrus. So that's the big debate tonight. So tune in, have your cup of tea ready. Here we go.
I have actually made the decision to stop watching, and there have been some things that that have led me to that point. And I think I guess it did start in 2017, and I gave it a very, very long chance to sort of satisfy me as a long-term fan. And I was very, very forgiving at first, but it's just gone on for so long. And knowing that season 2 coming up was done back to back with season 1, and being so disappointed with season 1, I just figured that I'm not going to, put myself through that again. I know that that's what's coming. I'm not going to put myself through that again. So that was my red line, knowing that those 2 seasons were back to back.
So how do you, right, okay, I'm a Doctor Who fan just like you, and Ryan's listening as well. How do you accommodate that? You're a Doctor Who fan, you know what's going on, you hear the gossip, you live and breathe Doctor Who. How are you dislocating yourself, and how are you managing it? How are you feeling?
There was a time when I would have struggled with that, but it's, and that's why, as I said, I was forgiving of it for so long and looking for the opportunities for it to fix itself or for someone to come in and fix it. I thought RTD was going to do it. He actually did the opposite and made it worse for me. So for me, I am relying on you. I mean, you can see the Blu-rays behind me. That's the era that I'm, relying on. There's plenty there. For anyone who likes the current, for the people I can count on one hand who like this current era, good on them. But I think there's plenty pre-2017 that I can enjoy. And what's gone on in the last year or two has actually tarnished my feelings for 21st century Doctor Who as well. So it's actually tarnished a lot for me personally.
Right. And just before I come to Ryan, then it'll give him ideas on what he's going to say. But for example, what's tarnishing old Doctor Who for you? What's starting to really creep in there?
Just RTD's attitudes about things. I mean, Davros Gate was a big one. That started it off. I was quite cranky about that at the start. Then David Tennant's come out with his attitudes on certain things and his opinions that I don't really care about. I just want to enjoy a TV show, So it's made me sort of hesitate even going back to their eras and when it was on the top of the pile in terms of television, when it was very popular. I sort of hesitate that. I definitely gravitate much more to classic Who than ever before.
I know your Davros point is if I look at Genesis of the Daleks now, I can't just enjoy Genesis. It's in the back of my head what might be happening in the future, and therefore it's kind of breaking my concentration and enjoyment.
to be honest, I couldn't have actually said what he said any better. To be honest, the point's already crossed for me personally. Like the only reason why I'm going to be watching this next season is purely because we're going to be reviewing it.
Yeah.
If we weren't doing that, I probably wouldn't be watching it, to be quite honest. But I sort of have now detached myself from it. I'm very much like, okay, this current era is not for me. It just isn't. Simple as that. But that's not going to stop me enjoying the 55 years of content that I do enjoy. You know, especially obviously the classic era, and filling that void for me personally. At the minute, I'm still getting my Doctor Who fix through the likes of Big Finish and stuff like that, and obviously still collecting stuff. So that's sort of how I'm filling that void. Like, even though I'm not really interested in, you know, new Doctor Who, Doctor Who is still very much the biggest thing in my life. You know, like we do this, I
Yeah.
still collect stuff. I'm still listening to, you know, Big Finish. I keep up with Big Finish best I can. And obviously the Blu-ray sets and enjoying those all over again. So yeah, it's like I was watching Attack of the Cybermen last night, you know, having a great time. You know, so even though this new year it's not for it, it's not going to stop. I'm taking the Star Wars approach to it. Even though there's a chunk of Star Wars, I'm like, no, it's like it's not going to stop me enjoying what has came before. Simple as that.
Is there anything both of you foresee that would bring you back to Doctor Who then? If you heard something was happening in the future, would you come back, or do you think it's lost to you?
Honestly, yeah, like I think if certain things were put into place, I would very much, because as I've said to you many times, I would, and I said this, I was sitting last night, having a chat with my partner, and I was like, it's actually very sad that new Doctor Who is coming on TV this week, and I am not excited about it at all. I would love to be excited about Doctor Who again. I'm just going to say, I think the only way that would happen is give it a rest for a few years. It comes back, and it basically sort of ignores a lot of stuff that's happened the past few years, and it just goes back into really good storytelling. This mysterious doctor traveling in his little police box, fighting monsters, doing good. You know, I just want normal. I just want the show to be as it sort of was, I guess. But you know.
Yeah. Dwayne, can we coax you back?
Not this year, that's for sure. I honestly think there is no point in even if the BBC wants to do something with it, I don't think there is any point now in them actually doing anything with it for at least 5 years. It needs a good rest. It's become a laughing stock. It is, you know, as much as, you know, some of the critics and some of the papers want to say how wonderful it is and how terrible the fans are. Well, they can say that as much as they like. The fact is, it is a laughing stock. I think it's now more of a laughing stock than the classic series ever was. And the classic series used to get laughed about too, but it never really felt like this before. So I think Chris Eccleston put it beautifully when he said, what need to be coaxed back to Doctor Who? Sack Russell T Davies, sack Julie Gardner, sack Jane Tranter, and I say sack Ncuti Gatwa and everyone involved with this production and make it completely brand new in at least 5 years' time. And hopefully we'll still be around to see it.
Now you know, and obviously with sounds and of audio, you know, you talk to a lot of Doctor Who fans and all the rest of it, and you know, so you know, I can see from my thread what people think on my channel, but you know, what's your vibe from the fans that you hear from?
We fans who come to our events, we always try and make them positive, so we don't ever dwell on any of the negative stuff because we're there for a positive experience. We're not there for the negative. So, but when we get together in the bars and you know get a few drinks under us, most of us are feeling the same. So, I mean, there are a few who really love this era, but most of us are feeling this way at the moment.
So, Dan, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, can you foresee yourself not watching Doctor Who, and why? What would happen? What would cause that?
Look, I think I have a feeling I'm going to be here till the bitter end, whatever the end looks like. And I guess even like an old friend, I'm probably going to want to see it through, uh, like someone on life support, I guess. So I don't think I'm ever going to tune out, but I will be sad when it's gone. I still feel like there's remnants of it floating around in the last season, and
what do you? Okay, then let's establish it. What are you still happy with regarding where we are with Doctor Who? Just so we all know.
look, I think the production values are good. I'm just disappointed with the stories and the characterization. I think it could have been a lot better, and it disappoints me that we had all this money, but I don't feel like it made the show any better. It just didn't translate for me to screen, really.
I always actually had a suspicion that I didn't want Doctor Who with money. It was only a suspicion, but I think it's confirming it now. They have got money, and they seem to be spending it on stuff that I don't think is relevant to the core of the program. It's stuff that just makes it look like another series, and I always thought Doctor Who looked different, and now with the Disney money, it's starting to just look like lots of other series out there. And it's getting lost.
I tend to agree with Dwayne, though. I think for all the criticisms thrown at the Chibnall era, I do think production design was actually at its best.
Yeah.
In that era, it doesn't. I don't feel it's as good at the moment under Disney, which is interesting.
It is interesting. I find we're making some interesting choices. Anyway, Doug, your thoughts? I mean, you've watched Doctor Who from the beginning. Could you see yourself not watching it, or have you already got to that point?
I agree with Dan. Thanks for your time. No, I do agree with Dan. Yes, I've been watching it since I was 6 years old. I'm now 67. And I think I might have a bit of Stockholm syndrome because I don't think there's going to be a moment when I'll stop watching it, but there's definitely been some moments when I've stopped enjoying it, if that makes sense. So I'm obviously a masochist as well. Okay, I think we've discussed this before, and it's going to probably sound a bit weird. If I had a Doctor that I liked or could relate to, I could even watch bad episodes because when I watch TV shows, particularly from when I was a kid, if I engage with the main character, I'll follow them through thick and thin. Having a good story is a bonus for me. So to answer your question, there's probably nothing that would make me stop watching it. But as far as enjoying it, if I'm honest, I'm not really enjoying it now. I keep trying to find little nuggets of things that I do enjoy, and I think absolutely the production values are good. But I do agree. I think the Chibnall era, despite all its flaws, looked beautiful. They really presented a beautiful looking show, and I'm finding with this money that's being thrown at it, I'm at a loss to know what it's been doing because it looks a bit cheesy to me and a bit overlit and a bit. It actually, even though it's expensive, to me it looks cheap. I don't know if that makes sense, but it doesn't look like this lavish show that they're
in
saying
some ways,
it is.
Doctor Who now, with the money it's got, is saying, right, we can use all the light bulbs possible. And so, look, I mean, I think the TARDIS interior is a case in point. Whatever we think of our favourite TARDIS interiors, the one we've got now, because of the money, you could argue not about the size, but it can do any colour light bulb. It can do any.
It's never about the size, Brendan. It's never about the size.
This is what I mean, but they can do all colours, all lighting now, and that's not the point of.
Yeah. And they haven't showed it off much, though, have they? Really? They've got a lot of potential.
What I was hoping for with when Disney money was involved, I was hoping we would get to see things that we might have always imagined. Things like, cyber ship fleets and the Doctor Who universe being expanded, and it just none of that's materializing with the money. So.
Yeah, I agree. Do you know, my actually desire was much simpler. I just wanted to see other rooms in the TARDIS like they did in the beginning, and they did a little bit in the Davison era, like make it look lived in like they did in the McGann movie. I actually don't mind the TARDIS set but it's not dressed very well. It's got one bloody jukebox. I thought I was wrong, but I thought they were going to maybe build it up on each episode, and maybe he could have some little knickknacks that he might have grabbed from an adventure or whatever, and over a period of time, it would have looked like somewhere where he actually lived. So the actual TARDIS room I quite like, but it's so stark and so bare and so brightly lit. They've missed. I think this show is, rather than a waste of time, it's a lot of missed opportunities.
Well, I'm sure there's
it's
going to be a
sad.
room which is going to be the biggest room in the TARDIS, which will be all his costumes. Because he's worn so many.
Yes. Yeah, I'm surprised they haven't done that even for a joke.
Well, the trouble is, what you've said, if I actually took what you said and said, oh, you can have knickknacks of all his episodes, so he'll have a bit of leather, he'll have a bit of
no, fair point. Fair point. a little bit of the bogey monster in a jar. I don't know. Yeah, I agree.
A few
fair
accessories.
Point.
I mean, honestly, I think it's probably best. You'll have a flag.
Maybe he doesn't. Yeah. But wasn't it so good though? Wasn't it so good in the original? I was actually rewatching some of the really early Hartnells because I've got the season 2, and just noticing things that I hadn't really paid much attention to. All those lovely little antiques within the actual area itself, like a lovely antique chair, and obviously the hat stand. But you know what I mean? And then the Capaldi TARDIS in his later season, they started putting in bookcases and lived-in bits. And like I said, the McGann movie, that looked like somewhere he was actually living in as well as travelling in. And okay, they probably wouldn't have knickknacks from these episodes, but maybe if they were smart from the beginning, they could have put little artifacts in the little callbacks to the series. They could have done so much with that space, and they just didn't. They wasted it.
Dan, you were saying you're still kind of limping on watching Doctor Who. You've mentioned a few bits that you are happy with. Go on, give us a snippet of something that really has caused conflict in your head.
Come on, Dan, give it to us.
Do you mean with the current era, or?
Yeah.
Look, I just found I was actually hooked on the second last episode, and with Empire of Death, and then that last one just didn't stick the landing, and it just completely fluffed it, and ruined Sutek in the process. That was devastating.
But that's the issue. That's the issue lots of Doctor Who fans would say to you. So I'm going to speak on behalf of some of them and say, well, he's wrecking. I mean, Dwayne has just been on and said because he's wrecked people like Davros, he can't watch this era. So you're saying, well, yeah, he didn't land it and Sutek was changed, but you're still watching it. So are you happy? When I say are you happy, how far can you keep watching something that is...
Are you happy, Dan? Are you happy?
What you're watching?
Yes, because to me, this show is bigger than what's on TV. It's bigger than the production crew. It's a legacy of so many people's hard work over the years, and I feel like I'm loyal enough to the whole thing as a whole, to the Doctor. I believe that it will come back or it will change, and what made it a great show is still there. The creatives that may not be putting it on screen right now, but I still want to be there for it. As a witness, to challenge it, to critique it. I don't feel that it's appropriate to criticize something you haven't watched, so I'm going to watch it and I'm going to give my bloody opinion on it. And and if they do serious damage to it, I want to be there and call it out.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked the question. My own answer really is, well, I've kept watching through all the different eras. Like a football fan, you have bad managers, good teams, bad teams, fallow patches when you get promoted. And a bit like Dan's saying, you seem to feel as though, but I'm loyal to the actual whole concept of it. But
I don't agree that it needs to go away either. I feel that it could be restored with the flick of a switch. I don't think it needs to go off, and it needs new leadership. I agree with that, but I
Dan,
don't think it has to go.
But again, I'll question you in a different way. Then some fans will say to you on that one, "What, you don't want it to go away?" But every episode seems to be tinkering with timeless children, origin story, the characterization of the Doctor. You can now make a second TARDIS with a sledgehammer. By generation, Davros now has legs. How many episodes are we going to stick up with until it's wrecked it?
Well, I would argue that it's done its own damage, but you can see in the classic run and even in the there are ups and downs. I mean, even in New Who, through the different eras, you'd have it bottoming out in the 3 to 4 million, and then it would go up to 7 million and 13 million. I don't think it's if you get it right, it'll come back. And we saw that through the 26 years of the classic run where, and realistically, if the BBC hadn't been trying to kick the show in its guts towards the end, it wasn't really doing as bad as history tries to make out.
Yeah.
So I don't think that, like, it didn't need to go away for 15 years last time. I don't see why it needs 5 years. I mean, realistically, it was it's been away. It was away for 3 years between Jodie and the new Doctor, between the 60th. So it hasn't been. Well, we've got 15 seasons over 20 years. It's had some big gaps.
Yeah. I mean, Doug, I suppose what Dan's saying in another way as well is that, look, we've had all the episodes that seem to change Doctor Who history and lore and origins, but maybe as Doctor Who fans, we just have to just erase them and just keep plodding on.
Well, again, Dan makes some really good points. I know we all talk about resting, and I've even said it myself, but I think if someone was brave enough, it doesn't have to stop. They just start the new series with no reference whatsoever to what's gone on previously. Forget about looking backwards. Forget about continuity. Just start fresh with a really good Doctor. I don't care who it is, but someone that is good. Make it a mysterious time traveller again. Forget about numbered Doctors. Let's get on with some adventures. Don't even refer to the original series. Maybe just do a throwaway comment about a new face or something. Much like Eccleston's first episode did. It was just a throwaway comment. Yeah. And I think that would make me very happy. If I honestly do believe if it gets rested, it won't come back. And if it does, I'll be dead anyway, so it won't matter. But yeah,
I think it will always come back in some form. It's been around too long.
No, you're right there. I'm talking about sort of mainstream, but you're absolutely right. The fans won't let it die completely. But we've discussed this before. Apart from fans like us, nobody really cares or even knows about it anymore. So I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I think if they do rest it, it probably won't come back. So I think ideally, what Dan says is right. Don't rest it. Just start again, but stop looking backwards.
For me, the red lines have long since passed. I watch now. It's not the best reason for anybody to watch anything, but I watch to see the depths that can be plumbed, the extent to which the showrunner is given latitude, and to see perhaps if any kind of editorial control can be brought into being. But as I say, primarily I just watched with horrified fascination to see where they can take things and the degree of unsubtlety that they can apply.
So it's become your version of Car Crash TV?
I'm afraid it has, and it's with a heavy heart that I say it. I take no pleasure from it, but it's now as much a test of concept as anything else, watching Doctor Who, for the reasons I've given. Can
you remember what actually, when you started to dislocate, what was the start point?
I think it was, we were talking to some of the lads a while ago about event television, and it was during Moffat's era, I think perhaps series 10 or even series 9, and things started to bleed in. Ideology started to bleed in. He became a bit more equivocating, not as steadfast and emphatic as I would have liked about certain things. I didn't care for the female Time Lord regeneration, where it was declared to be an upgrade. Things like that are red flags, and they were present a long time before some of the more insidious elements that we've seen of late. And it all started to point in a particular direction. And it's the only good thing about it, the only good thing about those portents is that they prepared me for what might be coming with Chibnall and then subsequently Russell T Davies' second coming, as it were.
Well, and I've asked the other lads this. So for those, I mean, because it depends on everyone's answer. So for those who say they've kind of dislocated already, what would bring you back as a Doctor Who fan to watching it on a regular basis?
I think it would have to be some reinvention. They'd have to go back to a time featured in the show that nobody was hitherto familiar with. Something like just before the Doctor leaves Gallifrey and then he goes out into the big blue yonder, as it were, and decides to investigate time and space. Perhaps he's not as moral as the person that we know and love. Perhaps he's a little bit morally ambiguous. Perhaps he steals the TARDIS because that's more in his nature. And perhaps he likes to observe but not interfere and help. And maybe something happens, something quite stark, a loss of somebody that he's perhaps become close to. And that makes him realize that he's in a position where he can interfere. The reason I suggest something like this is that it would be a good jumping on point for everybody. For this show to work, I think it needs to be a global success. I don't think it can be niche anymore. I think for it to have longevity, it has to be appreciated by the masses. We'll all love it on such a basis, but I think it needs to be appreciated by the masses to have the longevity that it deserves and the wider appeal that it deserves. And
see, part of, I think, what I will posit this. I think part of the problem is once the BBC said we're going to link with a streamer, we want to go bigger, global, we want to become this massive brand. As soon as I think they had that ambition, they're saying what you've said there about we must be mainstream. Now, as soon as you go mainstream, you lose or diminish or erase so much stuff. And it's whether the gain is worth the loss. So basically, you might gain some global viewers, but you might lose your whole base.
I agree, but it's not the current widespread appeal that I mean, if indeed it has any appeal. I meant what happened back in 2005 when Davies made the whole world see what we've known for so long. It was still bigger budget, and it was written large, so to speak, but it wasn't made garish by the fact. It didn't become an imposter to the show that we all love. Davies retained those core elements, even though it was a bit more lavish. And it's that I mean. I think that needs to be retained. That kind of, I don't like to use this word, because all of these words now are ruined by current Doctor Who, but upgraded. It was an upgrade on classic in terms of production values. And I think it was largely seamless because of the retention of those core elements.
But you know, for example, normally when we get a new Doctor actor, you hear stories that, they were given some tapes to kind of reacquaint them. You know, they may not be Doctor Who fans, so to reacquaint themselves with the different personalities of the different Doctors. And so basically you can imagine JNT and various producers pick the videos that will show the actors, probably the best templates. So if you were going to be the advisor, the Ian Levine of 2025 to the production team, what video would you show them? Would you say that is what you should be doing with Doctor Who now?
I think it would have to be An Unearthly Child, because there was that rawness to it. There was that rawness to it where we were all, I mean, I wasn't alive then, but the people who were watching it were on the same voyage of discovery that Ian and Susan were on. And I think it's essential to get that across to anybody who wants to play the part. It's not there's so many that spring to mind, the City of Death, Talons of Weng Chiang, but I think you need the point of entry element that An Unearthly Child provides. So that would be my choice, actually. And strangely, I've never thought about this before. It's an excellent question because I've never thought about this before. But as soon as you asked me the question, that story just presented itself to me.
So, and it's an interesting one, An Unearthly Child, because if I'm very brutally honest as a fan, you know that episode 1 and episodes 2, 3, and 4 are different.
Yes.
Episode 1 is off the scale, fascinating, interesting, mesmerizing. From, I say, the takeoff of the TARDIS, it's not really, it's a dematerialization, but all that, the way the Doctor is, the mystery of the inside, all that. And then, of course, we get into the kind of 3 episodes of ugh, ugh, ugh. And
Yes, I know what you
have you
mean.
got
Exactly.
have you got fire? With 1 or 2 interesting bits, because it was creepy in the Cave of Skulls, and that's classic Doctor Who creepiness. And you had the Doctor being alien with the famous moment with the stone.
Exactly. People forget that, I think. Sometimes when people criticize Jodie, I'm no fan of Jodie Whittaker. I'm no fan of the Chibnall era, not by any means. But sometimes when they criticize the fact that the Doctor wasn't more forthcoming about Graham's cancer returning, they forget that they are an otherworldly being who can be quite dispassionate and uninterested in the minutiae of human lives. I'm not saying that's necessarily the best stance to take, but I think Tom Baker, for instance, this was a Doctor who roughly pushed aside Lawrence Scarman's warm, dead body so that he could examine a bandaged robot. And I think that element of the Doctor should always be there to some extent. There's a bigger picture, and sometimes there is a pieces on a board element to other characters that we deem to be important, but in the big universal scheme of things, perhaps the Doctor has more perspective.
Coming back to your Unearthly Child idea, I'm going to be devil's advocate. I'm going to pretend I'm RTD. Oh, and I think he would argue that in, for example, the Robot Revolution that will have been broadcast on Saturday, there is a moment, just like in 2005, where the companion sees the inside of the TARDIS for the first time. They make a reference to it being bigger on the inside. You go through a bit of that mystery. So I suppose what he would say, if he's in this room now, he'd say to you, Paul, but that's what I'm doing. I'm touching base with an unearthly child. So is he missing, if that was his answer, is he missing what you're saying it should be?
In Rose, he adhered to those points very well. I liked what he did in Rose. I liked the fact that she came out and she needed to run around the TARDIS to make sure that it wasn't some sort of optical illusion, or that she literally hadn't come into contact with a madman in a box. I realise that phrase wasn't used until a few seasons hence, but I think she had to assure herself, to assuage any doubt that what was happening to her was real. So I did like what he did there, and I suspect very strongly that it stems from an unearthly child to some extent, those raw reactions. So I think, as I said before, that version of Davies was faithful in that regard.
Okay.
I do have red lines in mind. The moment pushing an agenda takes precedence over telling a good story, that line is crossed. I think it's fair to say that Doctor Who crossed that line 7 years ago, 8 years ago, at least. So would I consider watching it now? If it's for a specific purpose, like reviewing. But if it were about watching purely for my own pleasure, I probably would not switch it on, because I know what the content is going to be about. I don't need a self-absorbed, pontificating showrunner to dictate to me that I am bad in all ways, shapes, and forms because I don't conform to his worldview. In short, if the actor is going to tell me to go touch grass, I'm going to take him at his word. You know, I can't touch grass anymore. I think I've touched so much of the grass in my front yard, it's dead.
Yeah, you
I spend more time on it than here.
So now you referenced 7 or 8 years ago as well, which is pre-RTD2, pre-Shooty. Yeah. So what was going wrong then that was starting to push you to the exit door?
For me, The first hints of it included Bill Potts making a high priority of mentioning her orientation virtually every episode. That really was distasteful. It's like you made the point once, you don't need to beat a dead horse. But Moffat was doing it. I think Moffat was doing it more or less at the incentive of the BBC. They wanted some kind of agenda.
And let's get this right, Christian. What you're saying is it's the cleverness or subtlety of writing you want. And if you're saying there happens to be a lesbian character, it doesn't matter, but don't kind of just throw it at us like some mud ball. It's supposed to be part of a plot or a character development or something. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. When Chibnall came in, he pushed even harder down these agenda-driven roads. I'm sorry, I find that, again, boring and distasteful. So I guess he made the cardinal mistake of making his episodes largely boring, which didn't help. And then we got RTD coming back, and it got worse.
You know, the argument is, Christian, and I'm doing my devil's advocate bit. The argument is that 60s and 70s Doctor Who, whether it was done more subtly, had political messages of its time, you know, whether it's two super blocks and all, you know, all that stuff, nuclear weaponry and Armageddon, some on environmental, it was all there. So the argument now is, if you were the showrunner like RTD, all he's doing is reflecting society, which is more about mental health, more about the identity debate, more about those things. So all he's doing is what Doctor Who's always done.
You could say that's true, but one has to have a skill set to make that possible. Virtually every science fiction show likes to reflect the era in which it was produced. And a lot of the issues that were germane at those times will pop up. But is it done with subtlety? Is it done in a way that allows the viewer to make up their own mind instead of didactically demanding that the viewers adhere to a very specific worldview? And therein is, in RTD's case, his biggest weakness. He doesn't have the capacity to go with subtlety. He's not willing to let the viewers make up their own mind.
It dovetails into our discussion last week about saving Doctor Who, where basically I feel as though they are just changing what they think Doctor Who should look like. So basically, you know, he can be less subtle because he's decided the format's different. It's Doctor Who light. It's a bit like CBeebies Doctor Who. It's just like a bit of a da 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 da, you know, and then it's done. It's light entertainment. I mean, as you're listening to this, Paul, is anything kind of touching base with where you stand?
Oh, everything that Christian has said resonates with me. I think it's very interesting, the provenance, though, of when the messaging became untenable. Obviously, when Davies came back in 2005, he did it with a measure and balance that retained faithfulness to the original show. I have no objection to him sort of trying to further the cause of his own community. I found the castings that he made during that period to be quite amenable to a show being progressive. It didn't interfere at all. But I think what Christian said about the BBC giving Moffat an incentive, I remember reading something to that effect, where he was felt not to be enough of a feminist, or not to pursue feminist causes enough, and I think that sort of changed his writing. And I suspect the BBC probably did instill in him an agenda more than he otherwise would have had. So yeah, I think the provenance of when this does actually foreshadow.
It's interesting because a lot of people, one of the red lines when I did the original debate last year was about they didn't say DEI then, but it was the policies, like, you know, the tick box list they were talking about. I found it fascinating when I looked at an old 1980s kind of pop culture documentary, that when we had Boy George and Marilyn, remember they said that was gender bending. Remember the discussions in the early 80s about what is a gender bender? And I remember being at school going, is it a man? Is it a woman? And of course, there was all that kind of debate. And I feel as though, have we actually moved on? Because what that was gender bending, that was the concept. I'm not being rude. You know, that's what everybody said in the early 80s.
Definitely.
And now it's gender fluidity seems to be the vogue to some circles. Now, gender fluidity came in with Moffat, with Hellbent, when the Time Lord regenerated into a woman.
Yes.
But you see, I think the red line for some people, some would applaud it, is gender fluidity becomes a bit of an indoctrination program because they're saying you can actually, your gender can be fluid. And of course, some people would say, oh.
I think if some things I don't think belong in a family show. I think the idea of young people being subjected to unwholesome propaganda is enough to invalidate this show from being Doctor Who, and that practice has been undertaken for at least the last 2 or 3 years, I would say, in a full-on kind of basis. Also, assuming that you want to allow any such thing to be in the show, you could go a long way towards restoring it to success by bearing in mind that if you make the message and the story indistinguishable, then you can deliver on both. You can actually achieve what you want. But like Christian says, he's not prepared to involve any kind of subtlety. All he cares about is shoehorning these sort of new concepts into the show and letting everything else seemingly take care of itself, and it's not taking care of itself because there's been no due deference given to it.
Yeah. So I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, Christian, your main red line you seem to go to was the messaging. Is there another red line that is, if we solved the preaching issue and it became more nuanced and subtle, if that was solved, are there any other red lines that are still a problem?
Yes, and that is consistency with canon. We know that canon is the serviceable history that supports world building in a long-running show. You've got to be able to craft worlds that are believable. They allow for the suspension of disbelief. If you go for 55 years with a very specific piece of history, and then someone decides they're going to plug in a story that turns that history on its head and destroys it, i.e., the timeless children, that's a major red line. You've got to make sure you're true to canon. I don't want another Dallas Bobby Ewing coming out of the shower scene destroying everything that was done previously. It's already been tried in televised entertainment. It doesn't work. At least it doesn't work with devoted fans who are familiar with the history of the show and the rules it's supposed to operate by.
You see, Paul, I'm starting to get to the point. I don't know what my red lines are. I am conflicted by a lot of things, but I'm starting to think that one of the specific ones that may cause so much problem for me is Davros. If Davros appears as a humanoid with legs, I mean, as in they're forced through this new version, which actually erases. I mean, I think it's a red line that you actually completely vandalize and disrespect and erase the past Doctor Who episodes. Because
sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, because I cannot. How can I have in the same universe or on the same shelf have Genesis of the Daleks, Destiny of the Daleks, and whatever is maybe the version of Davros in the future? I'm sorry, but RTD has given me a major dilemma, and I think that may be the red line where I go, I can't watch this.
I think it's about, and it comes back to what we've all been speaking about. How much care is taken? So let's say, for instance, it went back to some prequel points prior to the K-led base being bombed and Davros becoming infirm. If it showed that, then that wouldn't be so bad because that would be continuous with canon. It would be a point that has been alluded to many times. if somehow the Davros in the travel life support machine elected to become mobile, devise some means whereby he could. I think there was a story, a Big Finish story. Now I realise that, strictly speaking, that they aren't classed as law, but there was a Big Finish story where there was some cloned replicas of Davros, and it was alluded to that he could use them as essentially a sort of a travel suit, should he wish. His consciousness could be put in them or some such.
Yeah.
If there was enough verisimilitude and a narrative was created so that Davros could rise up and walk, as it were, then that would be fine. If there was some integral, solid points that got us from one point where he wasn't bipedal as such, and then he was, that wouldn't be so bad for me. That's not what Davies is proposing, is he? This is revisionism that Davies is proposing, and not only that, he's quite blatant about it. He's admitted that he finds the law, the 55 years of law and things like that, to be problematic in some areas, and he's quite happy to daub his own interpretations over it. And as I agree completely with Christian, it's untenable. It's untenable.
You see, Christian, I've been a stickler so far, and I know a lot of fans are clearly our purists regarding our collections and everything. So we don't want to lose stories and erase them. So, you know, like some people say, oh, the Jodie Doctor's not for me. We need to start again with 2017. I struggle with that because I think you can't, once you start doing that, any producer in the future can do that, and you butcher your own history. You have to respect everything that's been broadcast on TV, I think, really, or just forget it, if you get my gist, but you can't erase it. The trouble is, Christian, there's me saying, look, I didn't really like that era, or I didn't like that timeless children's story, but it does exist, and I don't think you can just wreck it. But if you change Davros as an example, you are wrecking Genesis of the Daleks. I'm sorry, but why is it we're trying to be respectful of eras we didn't enjoy or thought were a mistake? But it looks as though RTD is quite happy to say, no, that is a mistake, and I'm erasing it, end of.
That's precisely the case. Now, this may be a different type of entertainment from what many of us have watched, but in 1982, John Carpenter came out with The Thing. And in 2011, studio had the opportunity to do a prequel to The Thing. And one of the things that I thought was so impressive about executing that film is that they tried very carefully to set the stage so that virtually all of the visuals, all of the narrative plot points that had existed in the previous film, they actually generated a thread that led up to in that prequel. That's the kind of story you're telling. But if this were RTD's opportunity, he'd say, you know what, I don't like the fact that there was an alien ship that came down. I'm going to say that the creature was generated in a evil corporation experiment in the Antarctica that went awry, and this will be the new prequel to the story, and I'm going to overwrite everything that was done previously. I don't think the audience would have responded well to that. If he'd wanted to have a mobily capable Davros and get away from the wheelchair, why not go back and do a 15-minute special showing Davros before the accident that led him into the wheelchair? You can do that, and the audience would say, there's a snippet of Davros on two legs that we haven't seen before, but it fits narratively into the story that we know exists. He chose not to do that. He said, everything that went previously is no longer canon. My version, what I want, is going to be canon. And the funny thing is, I don't think he did it because it was necessary. He didn't do it 20 years ago. I get the feeling that he was hunting for things to make a cause out of. Let's change the sonic screwdriver because I don't like the visual attributes of the previously. What do you mean? It's been around for 50 years. It hasn't bothered anybody. And now you have an issue with it? That's not realistic.
Well, I mean, our big home department store. I mean, he would obviously have a problem going into B&Q because obviously all those screwdrivers, he would want them actually locked away, and you'd have to be 18 above to be able to buy one. You know, the stupidity of his logic. When you extrapolate it across society, it's beyond belief. It just shows you how melodramatic or hysterical or reactionary is this progressive idea.
It's too whimsical as well. There's too much caprice in what he does. It's as if, and I think Christian's alluded to this already, but it's as if he wakes up one day and decides that a particular element of Doctor Who has to either go or be so stunted in its effect as to be non-existent. And I think it'll just go on and on. I think there probably will be some returning villains or monsters or some such that are iconic and sacrosanct, and by dint of that alone, he will feel that they should be upended in some way. And it's beyond any kind of help. I think it's beyond any kind of hope. The only good thing I take from it is that, and I've said this before, it serves to cauterize what he's doing from the show that we know and love. There's no way that when I sit down and watch Genesis of the Daleks or Destiny of the Daleks or any of those 5 excellent Davros stories from the classic era, there's no way that I allow his adulteration to infiltrate my mind, and I don't start thinking about, shouldn't Davros be walking, or shouldn't Davros be doing this, that, or the other, or speaking in a certain way. There's none of that, because it doesn't exist. It's not substantive enough. He has to make it substantive enough. All he's done is shows that he can be petty.
This is the issue that every fan is having to deal with. I asked the question about red lines because for those who are saying, no, let it continue, let it keep going, the damage that's being done might actually be much worse than if you'd actually put a line in the sand and said, no more, don't do that. Sorry, if you do that, that's the end of the show. But what we've done is it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. And I think if everybody was strict with their red lines, we wouldn't have got to where we are now. I think we've gone way bit. I think there is a possible extrapolation that Doctor Who will always, in some capacity, would be broadcast, but it would be Dr. Beige, Dr. Bland. It won't be Doctor Who. It'll be a very pale, pathetic imitation or parody of what it was.
I think that's a fair assessment. We know that the money is not there right now confirming another season of the show. We know it takes roughly 12 months at minimum for a show to be re-aired after production. So if they started doing something now, maybe next summer, there would be some opportunity for another broadcast. We know that's not likely to be the case, so we know there's going to be a hiatus. It's a cultural icon. The temptation to bring it back in some capacity is going to be there. The BBC is going to want to capitalize on that if it can. But what it looks like, if they decide they're going to follow a pattern that we've seen the last 7-8 years, it's going to be tepid. It's not going to be well received. Maybe they'll come out with a single Christmas special a year, 45 minutes. A whole year goes by and all you get is a 45-minute special, and it follows the same narrative that RTD is currently promoting. It'll be a non-relevant piece of fluff on television. It will no longer be a part of the cultural zeitgeist.
And this is why I've argued, and I've said it in my introduction, of course, is that some of us animal lovers, we know that you have to have a red line regarding your cat or your dog. There's a moment when you go, I think this is the moment we have to make the decision and put it down for kindness and to not be cruel. And I mean, therefore, the family has a red line. And I feel as though Doctor Who, as a concept, as a program, if you treated it like it was your dog, is it limping? Is it lame? Is it in pain? Is it struggling? Should it have been put down by now? That's the big argument, I think.
It's beyond redemption. Current televised Doctor Who is beyond redemption. And the sad thing is, it's the sort of situation that will take time. It will need time for people to miss it being on television. When the show came back in 2005, there was still a lot of affection for it, even amongst people who I knew not to be fans. A lot of the gossip about the show that I received in the run-up to 2005 came from people who I knew not to be fans, but they still remembered things like the Daleks. They kept saying to me, are those Daleks going to be back? Is the TARDIS going to be different? So they understood the focal points of the show, and they understood that even if they weren't fans, they understood what had made it loved. I think a lot of that has been eroded because of Davies' machinations, and it's going to be very difficult to engender that again, and perhaps a lengthier time might be needed. And it's with a heavy heart. I don't like the idea of the show being off the air for so long, because it belongs to this country. I don't mean I mind sharing it with other people, but it's a British institution, and there are so many British institutions being overwritten and discarded. Another one going the same way is saddening.
Because I mean, we are, you know, pure Doctor Who fans, and we want Doctor Who to be taken seriously. I mean, here's an example. There you go. There you go. There's Doctor Who when
still a great story.
It is. I like Creature from the Pit. But yeah, I mean, we're always aware. There's always a blemish, the mandrels, you know, that sort of thing. But you know, for every one of the Creature from the Pits we have, that's what I think. You see, I can't imagine a kid watching Doctor Who now and watching all the LGBTQ messaging and all these strange things going on, and it's like some hijinks. Instead of thinking of being scared to death, run into the hills, that sort of thing. I feel as though he's deliberately taken it away from what made it special. Which elements of Doctor Who, the programme, are non-negotiable to you as a fan? They cannot tamper with, they cannot touch. So, for example, if I said, I remember the fuss in the 1980s when John Nathan Turner, just trying to be getting publicity, mentioned that the TARDIS the chameleon circuit might work and it'll never be a police box again. And the media went mad, and so did the fans. We also had, when Tom Baker left, the moment when they said Joanna Lumley might be the Doctor and it might be a woman. Shock horror, that one. I know that ship has sailed, but, you know, should it have sailed? I don't know. The Davros retcon recently, the Timeless Child, of course. The loss of certain British elements. I'm just throwing a few in there, and there could be anything else. So basically, Rachel.
Wow. I'm really depressed right now. I'm just sitting here like sinking lower and lower.
It's therapy now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not normally our MO, is it? We normally have people cheat up. So Rachel, what's non-negotiable?
For me, it would be, and this has kind of happened already, it would be changing the Daleks. They've already changed Davros, which I wasn't pleased about. Now, okay, maybe there's some alternate timelines going on here, but I didn't buy this whole, like, you know, this is offensive to people with disabilities. But if they like change the Daleks too much to, like, you know, that humanoid version of the Dalek that we had, I think it was in Daleks of Manhattan.
Oh yeah.
Was it that one?
Right.
Now that was just one person, and yeah, it was kind of cool, but it wasn't a Dalek. You know, it wasn't reminiscent of my childhood of me going, I am a Dalek. I've told you about that before. And if they change that, I'm not going to be pleased. I wasn't happy about Davros being changed, so I'm not going to be pleased if they change the Daleks, and I will be like, nope, done, non-negotiable.
It's interesting because that is a big one, isn't it, Rachel? Doctor Who and the Daleks are almost, you know, twins. It was only the second story, and since then, people who aren't Doctor Who fans always say Doctor Who and the Daleks, don't they? They always seem to kind of link them up. So I can see what you mean. I got sick of them changing the Daleks. It's a bit like they've had the Dr. Donner and they've had the Master Donner, blah, blah, blah. I don't want the Dalek hybrid and the Dalek this and the Dalek that. I want a Dalek, you know.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one, and you did mention Davros, so good old Davros there. Let's hope it is a timeline issue, and he's just playing with us. But
I don't think he is. Sadly, I wish he was, Brendan. If it was a timeline issue, I don't think he would have done that extra confidential interview after that episode aired, that mini-sode. Yeah. But with him doing that, I think it's a permanent thing. And again, that for me is jumping in there is a red line that I never wanted anybody to cross. So, and that's part of my problem with the new series, is because going forward, I'm thinking, oh, is this Doctor Who? But then straight away in my head, it will pop back up. But what did they do to Davros? And straight away, I'm out, because that's a deal breaker for me. Davros is what he looks like, and is a fantastic creation.
He's instantly recognizable, like the Daleks.
Yeah, and we've said this before. It's not about his travel machine and his life support unit. He's just an evil genius that all he wants to do is survive to see his Daleks conquer the entire universe and him to be the supreme ruler. That's what he wants, isn't it? So.
And I'll be honest with you, John, that I mean, I know I'll bring timescales in who's got a different opinion, and that's what we want. But Davros is symptomatic of what they're doing to Doctor Who. And if they're going to do it to Davros, who's quite iconic, then I am, like Rachel and you, John, very, very worried, because the point would be, I'm a fan. I like to see that continuum across the 60 years. So the police box has stayed, blah, blah, blah. Davros since 1975 has been like that. And to change the kind of history of the character in such a fundamental way because of a message, just breaks that continuity. Now, if you break the continuity with a few things, you're breaking that link with the fans. And then you're going to force some fans to say, do you know what? It's not even, I don't recognize it. And Davros walking doesn't work because when I was a kid, this is how it felt. That, to me, seems to set lots of tremors in my head, which is when I watch Genesis, when I watch Resurrection and all the way through, I want to see a continuum. The Master, after Deadly Assassin, they showed you the burnt figure of the Master again in Traken. They didn't just jump around. I don't know. I hate the breakage of continuity.
I think, Brendan, as well, also, the way that they've got Julian Bleach now as Davros, it's just a generic sci-fi villain now. You could swap him out and put him in Star Trek, and you could put him in another sci-fi series. There is no difference. He was unique.
Can I also have explain to it from the performance perspective as an actress, because that's what I am, that's what I do. I actually feel like it when you got all four of the Davroses there on the screen, it actually it just poops all over the work that they have actually established, because words are just on a page until the actor brings them to life, right? And then it's up to the director to guide the actor and tidy up little bits. But these four actors have all made Davros who he is not who he is right now, but who he was.
Yeah.
And it's all thanks to them.
Yeah.
And yes, they're four slightly different takes, but they're all fundamentally the same.
Yeah.
But it just
and it's no surprise. It's no surprise that after in Keep of Traken, they had Anthony Ainley as a Master looking very like Delgado. They wanted a continuity, didn't they?
Yeah.
They did, but I actually think that was kind of a mistake as well, because it didn't then separate from Delgado, because we know that the Doctor changes appearance, and so theoretically the Master should change appearance. But at the same time, I also don't mind that they did keep the appearance the same. It's a bit weird, but
what you were talking about there, Rachel, about the great performances that the actors have put in over the years, and a lot of Jeremy and everyone else will probably remember this, but Michael Wisher is a great example about how Tom Baker always used to say that they would be doing their, practicing for the story and doing their rehearsals, and he would put a paper bag over his head while he was doing the rehearsal.
Yeah.
And Tom Baker would just see him, he'd made a hole and he was just smoking his cigarette. So all you'd see is just this smoke coming out the top of the bag, which is great. And then the other thing that I love about it is where Michael Wisher, he's in his Davros costume. Tom Baker he says the two brats from some BBC executives come down to the set and they go up to Davros to touch him. And Tom Baker's smirking because the kids don't know that Michael Wisher's there. And as they touch him, he moves his hand like that. And those kids never came back. That's what I love about it. And that's what's so good.
How many people here? He's so iconic that in our house, the remote control is called a Davros.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's that kind of it. Trying to be, I don't know. The whole thing is in the British psyche. Even people who don't watch Doctor Who, lots of people call their remote control the Davros. So it to change it into, why would you call a remote control a Davros if he's able-bodied? It just changes the whole thing. Yeah. I'm looking at the time, but time scales. I know your opinion. I mean, I'm asking for red lines. You don't even have to go there with Davros, but what have you got a red line with Doctor Who where if it's unrecognizable, you'd say,
No, I don't. And there's nothing non-negotiable with me, because I will take a new episode of Doctor Who anytime, in any format whatsoever. But I'm also really concerned, and I hope that the program is able to survive an era to where there is such a small group of creatives. There's supposedly a team, but if you look at Davros Gate, for example, that to me, it's in my face, and it shows me that this showrunner position is being given way too much power. And there needs to be an actual creative team with checks and balances to be able to prevent things like this from happening. Yeah. And when I said, well, I didn't say that. When I asked that question back in 2005, I very quickly got canceled. And I understand why, because everyone was really excited that Doctor Who was back. Well, so was I. But I was also asking, is it okay for one individual to be able to put all of their own personal agendas into our program without any checks and balances? And it looks like it's still going on today, here 19 years later. So I'm really concerned about the future of it.
One thing I want to come back on timescales as well is you said you'd always watch Doctor Who. Can I ask you in a different way then? How would you know it? How would you know it was Doctor Who?
Anything that says Doctor Who on it, I'm going to take, because I believe everything in Doctor Who is canon, fan created or what have you. BBC doesn't own all of Doctor Who. I think the Terry Nation estate owns the Daleks, or they did, or something like that. Somebody else, a family, owns the rights to the Brigadier. So therefore, BBC doesn't really have Doctor Who canon down. So I think everything in it is canon, and I will take new Doctor Who in any format that there is. And I love fan creations.
Okay. Brandon, have you got a red line? Have you got a red line?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just sitting here thinking we don't have kings here.
There you go.
I know we're limited before we go to the next part, but something I would say is, in some ways, I may have just come to the realization that in a lot of ways I've already checked out. You know what I mean? Like it's like in my attitude now is watching basically anything since I kind of got fed up during the Jodie deal. Is like I'm watching like zombie Doctor Who. You know what I'm saying? So I don't let it bother me like it's the old stuff, and it just pushes me back to the old stuff to watch more.
So you're kind of watching it as a routine or a habit, but there's no real love left.
Well, no, not just that. Well, I have, for me, in my own personal code or morals or whatnot, I've got to at least watch the first episode and give it a chance. I mean, I'll probably watch the whole thing. I'm sure I will, but I'm still giving it a chance. I haven't written it off. You know what I mean? Like we got really lucky this weekend when we did the first 2 episodes of X-Men 97. We thought we were just going to be crazy, and who knows what'll happen next week, but it was good so far. So I mean, you never know. Doctor Who could turn it around.
I mean, one little snippet before I come to Jeremy, which will be after a little moment when I'll put a little flyer up. But basically, as Rachel was hinting at, they can't change the TARDIS too much. If it becomes something very different or something very big budget Americanized, so it just starts to become something else, I will start to kind of look at the exit door, because that was there since 1963. It's the Totter's Yard. Sorry, it's just, that's how it was.
Well, I would say the theme music, if they change Ron Grainer's theme music, the first one, and if they change the police box, and as I say, if they turn it into some sort of like kind of musical, sorry, I won't buy into it.
Well, let me investigate one after the other. I'm going for the third one because I think they are going to do that. So does that mean you're going to be out the door?
Damn.
Well, if it becomes really bad, I'll just switch off. Come on then. Because fans talk about this. They know Star Trek's done it. They know Buffy's done it. Right. How far do we have to go for you to really say this is not Doctor Who? A 4-minute sequence, you'll still be with us, won't you? It depends on, I suppose, the song, but I think the song will be very cheesy, or it just won't be my cup of tea. We're entering into a situation with Russell T Davies who's trying to change this into a kind of soap opera, musical, science fantasy program, and it's not a soap opera, it's not a musical. Leave it for the stage if you want to do a musical, but for the TV program, I don't think it is. I mean, in Delta and the Bannermen, if you've got something along that line, it's part and parcel of the story. Because it's a holiday camp, and you're going to have the stage there, and you're going to have a bit of music and stuff. I can accept that, but when you've got an actor who's talking about the plot and everything, and then just all of a sudden music comes in and they burst into a song, it takes you right out of it.
However, because RTD's not daft, the Devil's Chord is the favourite, I think, for some fans where it might happen. And of course, if it's all part of the plot that you can only speak musically, so to speak, or the Jinx characters onto you or something, then it would fit a context. There'll be a way around it. But I wanted to say, before I go around the panel, just on this as a red line, whether it would be everybody else's, I wanted to come back on Jeremy on this one. In the recent BBC concert in November, when they had Russell Davies on stage, or was it Murray Gold on stage, and he was talking to Joe Riley, they were talking to each other, and they were saying, I wonder if we could do a full musical instrumental episode with no dialogue. And they kind of looked at each other, winked at each other, and said, shall we? Obviously not next year, but they were talking about that. Are you still on board?
I just don't think it would work. And like I said, I just don't think Doctor Who works as a musical. But if it's on stage, like, say, Doctor Who and the Great Adventure, or whatever it's called, Ultimate Adventure, then you can accept it in that term to a certain extent.
Were you happy with Heaven Sent?
Because so, I suppose.
Because that was a kind of that was seen as a new thing, which is one character for the whole episode. As long as
the script is good. But I mean, there were certain sort of red lines crossed for me a while ago when they commissioned Jodie Whittaker to play the part. And then, of course, they're changing the origin of Doctor Who by having the Timeless Child.
Right. They've already crossed all of our red lines, Jeremy.
So, of course, I stopped watching because a lot of all the other fans said it's not good. It's not as good as it used to be. And so later on, I caught up with the episodes maybe 6-8 months down the line. So right away, I was disenfranchised from the show.
Yeah. But if I asked everybody else on this one that was obviously raised by Jeremy first, would that be a red line to you, as in it's an unrecognizable element, or would you see it as a one-off episode
and you can get over it? Or once they start doing that to the series, do you think, well, you've ruined it now? I mean, Bobby Ewing coming out the shower ruined Dallas and never recovered. There are certain events in every program where it just ruins it. It changes it. Would this be one for you, everybody?
Yes. Straight up.
Well, we've already had, you know, a 2-minute or 3-minute part of a song in the Church on Ruby Road. Which again, it's like, why are they bursting into a song now? At that particular point, it just doesn't work.
I think Jeremy's right, and I think my view on it is, for me, this is where Doctor Who, or the people creating Doctor Who now, they just aren't coming up with groundbreaking new ideas for stories. And the reason I say that is because they're not doing anything different to any other kind of IP now. So like you were just saying a few minutes ago, Brendan, you know, Star Trek did a musical, Buffy's done a musical, and it's kind of like, oh, it's trendy to do a musical, so we'll do a musical. Doctor Who shouldn't need to do a musical because it's such a unique, fantastic show, you know, with engaging characters and stories.
It should set the trend.
Focus on that. It's just, but then it's pandering to a particular audience set, I think, in my opinion, that are going to lap that up, that are going to put it on TikTok, and, you know, they'll love it, you know. But for people that, you know, were watching, they'll just, you know, as Jeremy said, they'll just watch a few minutes of it and they'll go, no, sorry, I'm out now. You know, I'll go and watch my classic collection.
It's interesting, Rachel, isn't it? Because I'd like to see what you say about the musical, because I've heard your opinion, but just to kind of elaborate on it. But what John was saying then is also interesting, which is 1963, 64, 65, under Verity Lambert onwards, they were always ahead of their game in television terms, weren't they, Doctor Who? They were so creative, so inventive. Delia Derbyshire, for example, since we're mentioning the music, they were out there. They weren't following anybody else. So as you say, John, they were forerunners with no money. And that's what made Doctor Who possibly very distinctive. And so when we talk about this echoing other shows, I think you're spot on, John. Doctor Who's suddenly not the trendsetter. It's suddenly following other trends, and it's lost its own mojo. Rachel, why would you resent this?
I would resent it because actually, well, my degree is musical theatre, and I don't think it would ever work as a musical. Okay, so like, with musicals, it's how you come into the song, and how you introduce the song. In some musicals, like there's just these like random songs that just make absolutely no sense. So you mentioned the Ultimate Adventure. Those songs, they don't actually fit into the show. They're just there. And they're just there, and they serve the purpose of filler. When the song came in on the Church of Ruby Road, I was just like, is this a filler? It's just completely random. Is it just to make up time because they can't think of anything else to put in there? I mean, this is one of the things that I'd written down on my notes as to talk about, because even though my degree is musical theatre, I don't actually like the fact that songs are there. Now, with how you do it, Doctor Who and the Pirates is a better example of how you would actually do it, because there is a moral behind it, and there is actually a reason to have the songs there, so to speak, if they were trying to try out with a musical episode. If you don't know what Doctor Who and the Pirates is, it's the big Finnish audio drama of it, and it kind of works. But then at the same time, I don't really see that particular story as a standout episode. It's a funny episode. It is a thoughtful episode. But does it work as Doctor Who? Not really. But it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. And it is pandering to a certain type of audience. And I think that is where the Disneyfication, I guess you could call it, does come in, because obviously Disney do deal with songs. They do deal with musicals. They are predominantly animation-based, movie-based musicals, aren't they? Predominantly. That's how they pretty much began with Snow White. And that is one of their bread and butters. And that's definitely something that Disney have brought in, I think. Would it work? No.
and you know from your degree and from your profession that it's a distinctive genre, and it's not quite reality. It's a kind of hyper reality sometimes, isn't it? Kind of changes the vibe.
Yeah.
Very, very dramatic. It kind of, I can see why Jeremy has said that. I can see why you're saying it. Is anyone else jumping on this musical Red Line ship?
I'm not going to.
Look at that picture, Brandon.
There's really nothing more that can be said better than what Rachel just said. So I defer to her.
True that.
And I think that anyone watching or listening to this that missed what Rachel just said, you need to rewind and watch and listen to that again.
Yeah, and so
thank you.
Well, it sounds as though we are going down a certain path there. So you said Daleks, Rachel, as a red line. We've now got musical from Jeremy, which a lot of people are concurring with. Jeremy, you had the two others again. Obviously, one was the music, wasn't it? What was the second one?
The Ron Grainer theme.
Yes.
If they change that completely and add something, which is what I've feared. But obviously, Russell T Davies has still got a little bit of sense, and kept that theme. And obviously, the police box, which I think is important. It's all right to play around with it and to fix the chameleon circuit, and then it goes again. You've got some sort of play with that. But
how far do we? It was the first thing Rachel mentioned when she elaborated earlier, which is the change in. Yes, it's staying a police box, I dare say, but it's a police box. The interior is completely different, and then the police box, the way it even flies, is different. Now, I know I wouldn't walk away just because of that, but I can see again the way they're doing it, with the way it landed at unit headquarters and the way it's smashing into things now and the way it was skateboarded in Wild Blue Yonder. I'm starting to see this kind of, it's a gimmick. It's becoming, I don't know, it's a bit like Back to the Future. It's a kind of flying skateboard. I'm just starting to think this is becoming Hollywood Doctor Who.
I'm starting to compare it to the sonic screwdriver, because the sonic screwdriver for me is one of the worst plot devices of Doctor Who.
Yes. Yeah.
At the moment it is,
Yeah, at the moment.
I love it, but I agree so much. But I still love the sonic screwdriver. But you're completely right.
We'll just sonic that. The best thing about Wild Blue Yonder was when they actually put, when David Tennant put the Sonic into the TARDIS, and right, Sonic is gone out of the plot. I was like, yes.
Somebody had to come up with a real solution.
I think they're going to have more of a, because we talked about this in the trailer, and I said about, the fact that I don't like the TARDIS crashing in. What's lovely about the TARDIS is the fact it's unique to any other spaceship in sci-fi, whereby it materializes and dematerializes.
Yeah.
It's bigger on the inside than on the outside, and it's just a beautiful creation. Now I'm worried on one element that more and more you're going to see them flying it like a spaceship in any other sci-fi series, which seems to be more of a common thing happening. And I see more and more now where you say about gimmicks and whatnot. I see the TARDIS being used more to set up a joke as opposed to, taking them to a destination. Because when you did Wild Blue Yonder, that effectively, that whole coffee and, the TARDIS going haywire was to get to that Isaac Newton section, wasn't it? Effectively, because they could have just gone straight to where they needed to go. They just that was to add that little humorous.
And I mean, I know there's the police box thing, and actually Stephen Moffat, who we will mention in our headlines later, Stephen Moffat, in part of his interview to Glasgow University, he said that was his example for low budget. It was the low budget that meant they had to keep it a police box, wasn't it? That was the whole blooming point. And now it's become iconic. It's a classic accidental British thing, so to speak. And so to then start, but it's then to start changing its role. It was nicked. It was a broken Type 40, wasn't it? He never knew quite how to direct it. In the Daleks, they'd taken off too quickly from the past, and so basically they had a problem with navigation, didn't they? And he's had fluid link issues and all the rest of it. In the end, he wasn't the master of his own TARDIS, and therefore he could never guess where he was going. He had a randomizer for a while, as you know, but he never knew where he was going. And he certainly couldn't say, I'm going to land in that fortress there. I'm going to land on the M1 there. He could never do that. And suddenly, as you have started to see creep in, he's pitch perfect. Wild Blue Yonder is a brilliant example where Donna Noble's there and he lands just there, grabs her and swaps with the other one. And we've just done last week our review of Power of the Doctor when Ace falls off the unit building and falls into the TARDIS that's just been conveniently placed there. This TARDIS for a while, and I think this is my problem with me asking you all about red lines. Maybe we're not going to get red lines. It's going to be a death by 1,000 cuts. And so you keep thinking it's a musical. Oh, hold on, I'll watch next week. Or if Doctor Who's a woman, oh, well, it's been done now, so I'll keep watching. And in the end, if you just kind of really look at all the changes, you'll think, actually, the whole blooming program's gone.
And Brendan, I just want to jump there quickly and say, I thought I hate you because I'd got rid of that image out of my head that you've got on the screen right now. It took me a lot of time to deal with that, but I got over it.
Well, you see, that was one of the other things, which is once they've done it once, as we've seen with the TARDIS, they do it again. So basically now they've done an origin story, they can keep just cheaply referencing it, and somebody else further down the road will do it again. And so I was just throwing that up because I was talking, I forgot to kind of keep it moving. But any other red lines that come to mind? Any other big red lines? We've mentioned TARDIS now, as in police box. I'm kind of hinting at how the TARDIS is used, and it's getting to become too efficient and neat as a trick, a bit like Rachel said with the sonic screwdriver.
Well, he could have fixed some of the problems within the TARDIS over a short period of time. You can just about accept that, but it does take away some of the fun to a certain extent if he can pilot it anywhere he wants with precision. But again,
you've eliminated some of the unpredictability,
the jeopardy. Yeah.
Well, we actually said on the Power of the Doctor, and I just wonder what everyone thinks of this, because I'm just trying to see where you stand on, is Doctor Who? Because of the bi-generation, the Doctor can't die. Because in the Power of the Doctor episode, which I'd forgotten, the Doctor implants on the companion's shoulders. That's why they got a bit of static. This effect where they could have a Doctor hologram. So basically the Doctor's like your guide if you're in peril. So basically companions can't die because that's a neat trick. Doctors can't die. Companions can't die. The Cybermen can't die. What is the point of watching this?
Well, again, you're right. I mean, there's no consequence to any of it. I mean, when I watched that Wild Blue Yonder, and I did think for a moment, I thought, oh, blimey, this is bold. They're going to kill Donna, and I thought that would have been a really, really interesting direction to go in.
Yeah.
Because no one would expect it, bring her back and do that. But they didn't. And that also jumps into what we've been saying about the TARDIS, where that's just a quick gimmick to get Donna out of jeopardy, whereas the original series, that would have been curtains for Donna. That would have been it, because the Doctor would have ended up on the moon.
I think it would have been very intriguing. Sorry, Brendan.
No, you go on.
Okay, if they'd actually left Donna there. Yeah, and actually taken the wrong one. Yeah, I think that would have been much more interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe they did have the wrong Donna.
Maybe. Devil's advocate there.
I'm throwing, sorry, John, just for a second. I'm throwing this in. It's linking partly with what you're saying, and I'm just kind of making it concise as well. I think this is probably where I would start to jump off really properly, because I've noticed with the specials, I don't see why I want to just keep watching it. With the Power of the Doctor, I wanted to switch off. If there's no jeopardy, I can't see the point in watching. And I think Doctor Who is slowly just losing any sort of jeopardy. So to me, I think that it wouldn't be a specific red line where I'm looking for it. I think I'll just notice I'm getting more and more disinterested.
Yeah, well,
I could read the book and it's still on.
That's how I felt with Jodie Whittaker.
Yeah.
Just Jim Lehrer. It was a complete turn off for me.
Yeah.
But what Rachel said there,
that's when they
about
sent
the
me away.
idea. You know, Rachel's just thought of that idea. How can no one in that production team be thinking of doing something like that, or something out of left field like that? You know, because you know, you're talking about bums on seats. You're talking about getting people interested to watch the show. Something like that would get people talking, and that would be a water cooler moment at work. You know, I didn't see that happening last night. You know, but as you were saying, Brendan, you just go straight back to, oh well, that happened, didn't it? You know, what actually did happen in that episode, and you talk about it, and not a lot, if I'm honest.
But then David Tennant's Doctor wouldn't be able to have a nice peaceful life with Double having tea outside in the garden.
Exactly. Yeah.
Heaven forbid.
He's like a reunion substitute who can come back on again. He's one of those. It's like he's in a sin bin.
Yeah,
that's the whole point.
He has to keep cycling to keep his muscles warm. Yeah.
But I think with this, when you were just saying, Jeremy, I'd throw in there about the Tennant Doctor as well, is you've still got to have, although you can change things, you've still got to have some rules in that universe. And straight away, that puts people out, because you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, if there's a big alien invasion, the Tennant Doctor is not going to sit there in the garden having a cup of tea where it's all going on behind him. So it just doesn't feel believable. Exactly. And I'm not sure whether they've really thought all of this through. We'll see, I suppose, in the next season. But
have any of you heard of the saying that Peter Parker is Spider-Man and Miles Morales is Miles Morales? Yeah. So I think it was the Master of the GTA. He's been saying that David Tennant is the Doctor and Ncuti Gatwa is Ncuti Gatwa. And I think obviously he's made this like correlation of, well, David Tennant is still here, so he can be coming back anytime. So therefore, he is still the Doctor, and Ncuti Gatwa will always just be Ncuti Gatwa and never be seen as the Doctor. So yeah.
And it does change the universe, Rachel. I mean, I'm just thinking of what you were saying. Remember when we had the moment in the Christmas Invasion when Harriet Jones had to make a decision because they said sometimes the Doctor's not here to save us because there's only one. But now there's two. Mm-hmm. So basically, the peril for the universe and for the Earth has changed. Unit can think, well, there's definitely that Doctor there.
There's technically more than two.
So it's interesting, Rachel. The more we go down this path, the more it's kind of he's just on hand, like Red Adair used to be for the oil rigs in the 70s. I mean, it's just like,
well, it's like Legopolis. It's like the Fourth Doctor falls from that radio telescope now. So what happens in this? He just gets up straight after, knackered, and just says, "Oh, I'm all right. You know, great."
And watches Peter Davison walk away.
Exactly, and just stays by the radio telescope.
I never knew when you retcon it, you think poor Tom Baker, he fell from that height, but Jodie Whittaker falls from space and she's fine. So how the hell that, no consistency. So has anybody else got a red line or something that would really concern them? So far I've got Daleks. If it went musical, No Jeopardy, The Police Box, anything else? The music, sorry.
The Doctor.
Now, the Doctor obviously will always be in it. So if you elaborate, John, what do you mean by if the...
I suppose more characteristics, because the more and more it goes on, I start, and I've touched on this before, but I start seeing less of the Doctor as a character, and I just see a generic actor who is doing
a proxy for RTD.
Like I say, the trailer the other day was, what is it? Give me the lovin' or something he says as well. And I'm just like, why? It's not Hollyoaks. Sorry for people in the US. That was a 90s kids soap. I just think the more it goes on, the more the Doctor's losing that otherworldly, eccentric alien being character, and he's more just, I've said before, it's just you walk into a pub and you see him, he's like any other person in that pub. That's my view, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope that changes, but it seems to be going that way.
I think a lot of that's also to do with the writing as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
I think they need to bring in some of the Big Finish team to start writing the episodes too. And then they've got to
there
start
you go.
sounding more like the Doctor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But the problem with Big Finish, though, it's getting more that way as well.
Early Big Finish.
And that's why
early Big Finish,
early Big Finish, yes. But
yeah.
But that's why I stopped buying those.
So when I've written down the Doctor's character becoming really very human, as a red line, so to speak, emotionally involved, blah blah blah. How far are we going into the woke territory and the message that we know the message is in there already? It's just that how far can we accept this? You mentioned Hollyoaks, which was intriguing, really. It's not just 90s, it's still on. And as you know, there's a very controversial storyline at the moment with a trans.
That's why I knew what it was. We watched that on Culture Council.
And as you know, it's a trans kid, and the way they're being almost groomed is really controversial. And so how far can we allow that to be infecting the Doctor Who franchise, where you just go, oh, I've had enough? And like I said, I always tell the anecdote. I was at the bus stop the other day in the village, and I had 3 people. Sorry, it's when the Star Beast had been on, and they weren't Doctor Who fans. They were just waffling on about life. And they said, did you see Doctor Who the other night? And they said the moment the pronouns thing happened, they all switched off. And I wasn't asking them, and they all mentioned that. And I thought, do you know what? People are turning off. They've got a red line. They don't want to hear that. So I'm just mentioning what John, you've said about the Doctor character being compromised, and I'm pushing in this. Is the message a concern, or is it just part of the fad of media?
It's a concern, and I think this to me speaks of, and it's not just the Doctor Who production, it's other production companies around the world, and it just shows their total disrespect from the viewers and the general public, because most, like you say, most people you speak to, you hear them say they've had enough of it. They're sick and tired of hearing about all of this nonsense being put in. If you can have it in there, but you can have it as an engaging story. But my argument has always been, you don't have to have every single show having that diverse LGBTQ element to it. You could do an LGBTQ series, then you could do a show which is more respectful to its origins. But they don't do that. It's literally in everything now, and it's you know, you can see it in the trailer. It's all in there to see, isn't it? And you know you're going to get more of it. And you know, I think they won't listen. It's going to take people out of it. One day they will listen, you know. And that's
John, you said something earlier that I'm still thinking about. It seems like to me that you are holding on to some hope that there actually is a creative team. Okay.
Yes.
A team. And I don't believe that there is a team. No. And since 2005, I have seen Doctor Who being manipulated by someone who wants to insert their messages into it. And I don't believe that there is a team. And that's it's a red line that's already been crossed with me for the last 19 years. And I admire the fact that you are holding out onto some hope that there actually is a creative team, but I don't see it being a team effort.
Yeah, and I think you're probably right on that. I think maybe it's not a team as such, like you say, it's one individual, but I think the hope maybe I cling to is the fact that in a few years' time, because Doctor Who will always come back. It's that good, you know. It will rest in a few years' time. Someone will resurrect it, and it'll be a knockout hit again. It's going to happen. And I hope for that. Yeah, and I hope for those days that someone comes in that respects the source material, and I hope from this era people learn high up in these production companies that you actually need proper custodians of these IPs, that they will look after it and respect it so that lines aren't crossed. And I think that will be a learning point, I hope, in years to come, where they say someone is sat there and says, no, that goes against the core of the show, we're not doing it. And that's not just Doctor Who, that's Star Trek, that's Star Wars. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you know, that's the only way they will truly become knockouts again.
So you got Power of the Doctor, Tennant comes back. you know that in a year that we're getting RTD, or it comes out, RTD's coming back, David Tennant's coming back, and so I figured the entire year of 23, I'm doing the year of Who. So I bought all the novels and watched all the episodes and watched everything, got ready. I was like, oh, this will be sweet, man. And you get to the premiere of the Star Beast, and you sit down, and the first thing they do is start hitting you over the head with the pronouns and the stuff. And and I think I'm cool with everybody. I love everybody. I don't really care what you do, but it's more about the thing that I realized in that moment was that I wasn't really watching Doctor Who. I was watching a message dressed up as Doctor. And so at that point, I kind of checked out there.
So it is the message. How far does the message have
and just, well, you see, I'm sorry. My thing is, because the message, how much further could it go? I'm scared to see. We're going to find out. And that's the other thing that really kind of makes me mad is RTD, your whole job is to get people to want to watch, right? And I mean, you brought this thing back. And that was in my mind. I remember that whole year telling my wife, well, I've read these rumors that this might be in there, that might be in there, but RTD wouldn't do anything to hurt the shit. You know what I mean? Wrong. And so it just all came crashing down on me watching the Star Beast, and I thought, well, at this point forward, I hope, just like John, I watch it still because I love the stuff and I want it to get better, just like John and Scale said. But just and having some own personal, I've got teenage children. I've got one of my own children be touched rather closely by one of those issues, and so for me, it hit home, and I was just tired of all that stuff. What I want is something for everybody. You know what I mean? I want something we can watch and interpret the message for ourselves. That's pretty much the last thing I'll say on it, but would be to say I want you to present something to me, and if I interpret it this way and Brendan interprets it that way, whatever. I'm over directly trying to control what I and people think. Just entertain me, man, and then the money and all the good stuff will come. You just have to entertain me first. And also, I wrote this down, Brendan. Retro futuristic. They should have spent all that money and made Doctor Who still look cheap, but retro cheap. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Been thinking that for days.
Yeah, and I think you're onto something then. I do. It doesn't feel British when it looks expensive. It just doesn't feel it. We used to love watching the American shows in the 80s and 90s. They had money, you could tell. And then you get your little British show.
Right, yeah.
Coronation Street versus Falcon Crest, it doesn't work. But yeah, I mean, one thing I was going to say about the message, it was going to come back to me then. It'll come back to me. Does anyone want to pull in? I was going to say something just to add a supplementary to Brandon there.
Well, Doctor Who, it's always had some form of messaging, but it's always how you do it. And how they're doing it right now, that's what's creating the problem. We say show, don't tell. And right now they are telling us, they are not showing us. And that's what's creating problem. For example, in the Star Beast, we had that quite nice little scene with Sylvia and Donna, and I was cool with that. I was fine. And then we had Rose come in a bit later, about pronouns, and it was much a telling off, and it felt like it was telling us off too. Now, I'm cool with trans people being in Doctor Who and non-binary people being in Doctor Who. If that's what you want to do, great, absolutely, knock it out of the park. And then we had the Church on Ruby Road. I've actually written this down, actually. The Church on Ruby Road, there was a trans character in the Church on Ruby Road, and the trans character was singing, but the trans character was just there. And that, I preferred that over the telling.
Yeah. I remember pointing at my wife and saying, that's how to do it. Yeah, I felt the same way. I was like, that's how you do it right there.
That's how you do it. That's exactly how you do it. You have the person there, and they're represented, and that's great. And that's how I want it to be done. I don't want to be told. I just want to see.
Doctor Who should be a vehicle to bring people together. As cheesy as that sounds, man. Look, I mean, our people, our two countries have killed the hell out of each other. You know what I mean? And we're all friends. Just like, I mean, you know, it brought us all here, and we're from thousands of miles away. If you look from you in England all the way to Scales in Cali. So I mean, it's like I wanted that. I don't want it to lose that legacy. It's gosh, I mean, young me would think I'm so goofy and cheesy, man. But I mean, I really do mean that. Like, you know, it's such a positive thing.
Can I just say before I forget, because I'm older than you, John, because I forget, Stephen Moffat, which I will eventually get to in the headlines, Stephen Moffat also, as part of his interview, was saying Doctor Who is for kids with adults watching. And he made it very clear. Now, if you follow that through, what you've just been mentioning, Brandon, about the Star Beast and the messaging, well, that's what I mean. Some parents, well, I say some, I'm being a bit weak then. A lot of parents would find the messaging problematic and something not to let their kids watch on their own, because it goes against how they're bringing up their kids. So that defeats where Stephen Moffat seems to be coming from, but I granted he's not the showrunner. The other thing is Doctor Who always had messages, you know, Green Death and all the rest of it. We know this. The difference now, it seems to me, is saying 10 years' time, if you watch some of these episodes, like the Star Beast again, they'll look such old hat. They'll look so silly. They'll make Doctor Who,
no matter how good the effects.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what worries me. The Green Death, you don't laugh at, whether you believe in global warming or whatever, or litter or whatever. You know, it's a good story. It just stands there. But I think some of this is going to age so fast.
To me, when
hopefully it ages fast. Hopefully it ages really fast, and we can get beyond this. Yeah. You know, it's the messaging is ridiculous. Is what it is. We are paying to be preached to. Now, I know that you British people have to pay a license to watch TV.
Yeah, y'all really pay.
Yes. Yeah, but you know, technically, Doctor Who is not free for us either. I have to pay a monthly fee to subscribe to Disney Plus, where I don't watch anything on Disney. And if it wasn't for Doctor Who, I wouldn't be subscribed to it. Yeah. But I feel like we're paying to be preached to. Yeah. And I feel like there is a lack of a team, and I think it's been out of control since 2005. Right. And here we are 19 years later. Brendan, I know you don't like us to cuss on this channel. Can I just say one word? Grooming. Grooming is something that people were discussing on forums. Not me. I just heard it from a friend, okay? But that's something that people have been discussing on forums since 2005. And I don't want to pay to be preached to. But it's not new. You know, this has been happening in the US with our sitcoms since the 1970s. All of a sudden, a sitcom would become more wholesome, so to speak, if it had some sort of a message that it was delivering inside of it. But here in 2024, this has gotten way out of control with Doctor Who. And it makes me sad that there is not a creative team with checks and balances.
Now, timescales, you're in the hotbed of where everybody stereotypically says this all starts in California. So is there a possibility?
We didn't do it.
There's nothing Americans can't screw up.
We didn't do it, man.
What I'm asking, timescales, is there anything else coming down the road that you've seen in California in this sort of messaging in the media and in the way everybody's talking? Is there anything else coming after the trans debate?
I don't think it can get worse than now. I really am hopeful for the future of Doctor Who, because I see it as eras, and it could be because of my age, where I look back and I have seen the eras of Doctor Who, and once it is aired, that's it. Once it's been filmed, it's been aired, that's it. That is an era that is established, and I'm just really hoping the best for the future of the show. I hope that we will have a creative team where we don't have such a small group of 3 people controlling the show and acting as the showrunner and the writer and inserting their own agendas into the program. I think it's ridiculous that should have ever been allowed. You know, here in the US, we have publicly held companies. Disney is one of them. Okay, so you will have a position as the CEO. So let's call the CEO the showrunner, and then let's pick another position, the accountant. Okay. The CEO does not act as the accountant. Those are two different positions. And I don't understand why BBC is allowing a showrunner to act as a writer, where this person is just repeatedly shoving these agendas down our throats. I think it's really unfortunate. And it's not just Doctor Who, but I'm really sad to see that it has infected Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a big one. It sounds as though a lot of us are in agreement about that could push us away eventually. Is Rachel? I guess, is there something else that you've got as a red line?
It's just, I think we've kind of touched upon it already. Now, I don't necessarily think this will turn people off per se, but it's like the CGI. Okay. Now this is gonna, I don't know how to explain this, but all right. Well, classic Who, obviously they couldn't rely on CGI, right? Because obviously of the time period, and TV was still a relatively new concept, and they relied on practicality over the computer generated image. But as time has gone on, obviously they've invested more in CGI, and in particular, I think, in particular from Jodie Zero, might have started a bit earlier. They've started to rely more and more and more upon CGI, and then we get to Wild Blue Yonder. And I wasn't keen on the CGI in Wild Blue Yonder. I actually wish they relied more on the practicality rather than the CGI in that, because I felt like the CGI was, I don't think, was it realistic? Not really. It was like a long corridor, and it kind of gave me a bit of motion sickness. And when that happens, I'm like, oh, I can't watch. I mean, I'm not keen on Wild Blue Yonder anyway.
Yeah.
And but that just didn't help it at all. That didn't help it. And it's that, to me, where do you draw that line with the CGI? Where do you start bringing in CGI versus the practical effects? Alfonso, I think his name is Alfonso Cuarón, the Prisoner of Azkaban director, for Harry Potter, the third film. He likes practicality over CGI. So wherever he can, he uses like animatronics and things like that. But with the Remus Lupin going into the werewolf, obviously he knew he would have to rely on CGI for that. But what he did was, as much as he could, he had the actor do the practical stuff himself before it switched to CGI, before it became too dangerous for the actor to continue on with that. And I just want some of that practicality brought back in. That I think they're starting to rely on CGI a little bit too much, and now Disney had become involved in investing in it and giving it money. It's going to go even more that way, I feel like. And they did it with Wild Blue Yonder. You kind of see it. Well, I suppose you will see it with the toy maker, because, you know, you're in the toy maker's domain and things like that. So you will see that sort of thing. But it's just, they need to pull it back and start going back with practicality as well.
And that's why I just showed that from Death of the Daleks there, where basically it's simple bit of CSO, as they used to call it. It was a good shot for its time. And that works. You've got a model polystyrene type city, Exelon City. You've got lovely Belal in the foreground with a couple of rocks. And, you know, for that second or so, as a kid, I was transported there. And I know what you're saying, Rachel. It's just too obsessed with it. That shot is pushing the boundaries out of necessity, but they're certainly not trying to kind of do something else.
I think it was John Pertwee who said, like, because they do it with the aliens as well. They use CGI for the aliens. He said he actually much prefers, I think it was John Pertwee, the where you can see the eyes.
Yeah.
Because you can relate to it. You've got something to react to. And of course, actors react. That's how you become a good actor. And it's better that way. But also there's a connection, and there'll be a connection there for the audience too. You don't always get that with CGI.
And I think Rachel's spot on there, because one of the worst sins I find in Hollywood in the last 20 odd years is the advancement of CGI compared to practical effects. And to give you an example, in my opinion, that isn't Doctor Who related, is the last Indiana Jones movie bombed, and the one before it. And why do people love the original 3? Because it was practical effects and it was great. Now you know that it's just CGI, and they're stood in a room doing those, not doing any practical effects whatsoever. And Rachel's right. Disney, I think they've invested. I think it's called the Vault or something like that they use for Star Wars. And you see it now, and you see that most of their episodes are on Tatooine now, because it seems to be that's the one they walk along.
Yeah, it's like a big panorama.
Yeah. And I think Disney are going to have access, are going to be giving Doctor Who access to that now. I really do, and I think that's going to play a major part going forward.
And this was part of what made it Doctor. Look at it. This is what made Doctor Who Doctor Who, wasn't it?
Just rewatch this.
Yeah.
You know, and especially the Action Man tank in the foreground.
Oh God, yeah, that forced perspective on the little toy. Tank.
Yeah, and I think there's a moment when Sarah Jane is apparently held, and it's like a rag doll, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's like a little kid's doll. Yeah.
But again, it's the scripts, isn't it? It's the scripts. They're so engaging.
Yes.
You can watch Robot again and again and again because it is that good. I really love it. Tom is fantastic in it. But now it's the scripts that are missing. You know, you can have all the effects in the world, but it's
while we're talking about the big budget and the effects that Rachel brought up as a kind of red line about going too far. Can everybody remember Warrior's Gate?
Yeah.
Season 18 with Tom Baker, Lalla Ward, with is it the Tharrells? And it was that gate.
Yeah, vaguely. Yeah. Vaguely. Yeah.
That used an awful lot of CSO, didn't it? And sometimes it was almost a photograph of a garden backdrop. And they would,
you can tell when they put them in there.
and I have to say, every kid watching it at that point knew it was CSO, but it wasn't a problem. Even me as a little kid watching Robot could tell that was pushing it to the boundary. You know, I could tell. What about Invasion of the Dinosaurs? The dinosaur one. I went with that. I just think sometimes, and as I said earlier, didn't I, Rachel? In one of the interviews, Russell Davies was basically saying, while you've got the big budget, you need to show the big budget. And I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's great to have the budget. I'm not going to lie. I've worked on cheap budget productions, and you know, you had to make do. But then, you know, you get all this money and you're like, oh, where do I spend it? Where do I spend it? And sometimes it's too much money.
That's the thing. That's the thing. If you've got the money, you're going to spend it.
Well, Jeremy, what about this? It was mentioned, I think it was mentioned in our stream, or I've heard it somewhere. It may be timescales. I cannot remember. But basically, instead of 8 episodes lavishly produced, with that big budget, Rachel and Jeremy, we could have maybe 16 episodes, but looking a bit cheaper.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. It's a good point, but I also wonder, why is Russell T Davies making these statements? Is he speaking for himself, or is he speaking on behalf of a team? I think that's a valid question.
Yeah,
I think the interview with Russell T Davies that was in The Guardian, when he was talking about the license fee, there was no coincidence with Tim Davie mentioning about the license fee and using Doctor Who in a way, saying, well, you know, if we don't get the money, you know, and Disney not in it, then, you know, we're saving all these programs, so Doctor Who could be off. So
I also find it interesting that not BBC, Disney decided to invest with currently all the abysmal failures at the box office going on at the moment. That's a huge
makes
move.
No sense, does it?
It's because they're desperate.
Makes no sense.
Disney Plus, Iger's in a proxy fight at the moment.
Yeah,
and he wants to make Disney Plus to be a success, and he knows the Star Wars shows are failing, the Marvel shows are failing on Disney Plus. People aren't engaging with them, so they thought, what else
people don't know how much money they've lost, do they?
Yeah,
Doctor Who, that's what he's thinking. Oh well, all the people who speak to him are saying, well, why don't we get Doctor Who? Bring Doctor Who in.
The mistake that he's made is he's conditioned people to wait for things to, well, not Iger himself, but they've conditioned, Disney have conditioned people to wait for it to come out on Disney Plus.
Yeah, that's part of it as well.
That's the
Absolutely
part of the problem. So he thinks that Doctor Who could save it.
Yeah.
I'm the Doctor, and I save streaming services.
That would be a storyline enough if he did that, wouldn't it?
Peter Capaldi returns.
It might work. It might.
At this point, if I was them, I'd be willing to try about anything. What they don't realize is all they have to do is go back and look at the blueprint from 66 to 89 and try to maybe rekindle some of that magic with a little flavor of the new that
exactly
brought people to.
That's all they have to do. That's all they have to do. And they
have I missed anything out from our red lines while Jeremy's talking there? Police box, musical, Daleks, the theme tune, We Need Jeopardy, the message, musical, over reliance on effects. Is there anything missing?
It's whatever comes in the top order. So I suppose it'd be the police box, musical, theme tune, possibly certainly the Daleks. Even though they have been changed a little bit.
There's going to be a messaging musical inside the police box. With
and the police box will be a piano.
Amazing effects,
I mean, just how far can they go? Can you have a Dalek singing? Can you do a Hollywood big dance spectacular with lots of Cybermen? I mean, where do we go with this?
Are you trying to wish these into existence?
They might introduce tap dancing into the TARDIS. There's a lot of metal in there now.